I bled out on the freezing asphalt while my fiancé was busy buying his best friend a limited edition Kelly bag. When my heart stopped, I swore I'd never love Liam Sterling again. Then, I opened my eyes right back to the exact day that ruined my entire life. The sterile, suffocating scent of the ICU was the last thing I remembered. That, and the relentless, rhythmic flatline of my own heart monitor. In my previous life, I was a martyr to a man who never put me first, Liam Sterling. We had been high school sweethearts, the golden couple of Oak Brook, Illinois. He was the brilliant valedictorian destined for the Ivy League. I was the ambitious artist with a coveted acceptance letter to Parsons School of Design. But then there was Audrey Carmichael. Audrey, who was always too fragile, too anxious, too dependent. Audrey, who failed her classes, who constantly had panic attacks that only Liam could soothe, and who somehow managed to wedge herself so deeply into our relationship that she became a permanent, suffocating third wheel. When we were 18, Liam gave up his acceptance to Harvard University to attend a mediocre local college in Chicago, simply because Audrey hadn't gotten in anywhere else and needed a familiar face to survive being away from home. Like a naive, lovesick fool, I followed him. I gave up Parsons. I gave up New York. I stayed behind, working double shifts at a bridal boutique on Rush Street to help pay for Liam's tuition and his eventual tech startup, while he spent all his free time coddling Audrey. And my reward? 10 years later, on the verge of his company's massive IPO, I discovered he had secretly transferred 30% of my founder's shares to Audrey. When I confronted him in the pouring rain, I was hit by a reckless driver. As I lay dying in the street, my phone screen lit up with a text from Liam. Audrey is having a meltdown about the IPO press release. I'll come home later. Stop overreacting. I died with my blood pooling in the gutter, completely alone. So, when I gasped for air and sat bolt upright, drenched in a cold sweat, I expected to see the white ceiling of a hospital room. Instead, I saw the familiar, faded lavender walls of my childhood bedroom. The posters of Alexander McQueen and vintage Vogue covers were still taped above my desk. I scrambled out of bed, my knees weak, and grabbed the iPhone 8 resting on my nightstand. May 1st, 2018, National College Decision Day. I stared at the date, the glowing numbers burning into my retinas. I was 18 again. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of my heart. I wasn't dead. I was back. The universe, in its infinite, twisted mercy, had handed me a loaded gun and pointed it squarely at my past. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Liam. Meet me at Intelligentsia Coffee on Broadway. We need to talk before school. It's important. A cynical, bitter laugh tore from my throat. I knew exactly what this conversation was. This was the moment, the exact crossroad where I had originally thrown my life away. I didn't bother curling my hair or putting on the expensive vanilla perfume he liked. I threw on a pair of vintage Levi's and a simple black turtleneck, grabbed my car keys, and drove to the cafe. When I walked in, Liam was already sitting in a corner booth. He looked so young, his jawline sharp, his messy blonde hair perfectly styled. He had that arrogant, casual confidence of a boy who had never been told no in his life. Across from him sat Audrey. She was huddled into a beige, oversized sweater that swallowed her petite frame, looking like a damp, trembling kitten. "Chloe," Liam said, his face heavy with a manufactured seriousness as I slid into the booth opposite them. "Thanks for coming." "Make it quick, Liam. I have to finalize my enrollment deposit today," I said, my voice completely devoid of the warmth I used to reserve for him. Liam blinked, momentarily thrown off by my cold tone, but quickly recovered. He reached across the table and placed his hand over Audrey's. She sniffled, looking down at her untouched matcha latte. "It's about college," Liam began, taking a deep breath, like he was a soldier preparing to deliver tragic news. "I'm not going to Harvard." I looked at him, my expression blank. "Oh?" "Audrey didn't get into NYU or Columbia," Liam explained, his eyes pleading with me to understand. She only got off the wait list at Columbia College, Chicago. She's terrified, Chloe. You know how bad her anxiety gets. Her therapist says moving to a massive city alone could be detrimental to her mental health. So? I asked, leaning back against the leather booth. So I've decided to decline Harvard, he said, his chin tilting up in defiance. I'm enrolling at Loyola Chicago. It's close enough that I can check in on Audrey and make sure she's okay. Harvard will always be there for grad school, but Audrey needs me right now. In my past life, this was the moment my world collapsed. I had cried. I had begged him to reconsider. And then, out of a desperate fear of losing him to her, I had given up my own dreams to stay in Chicago with them. This time I just stared at his hand resting on top of Audrey's. I felt nothing but a profound, hollow disgust. Wow, I said, my voice cutting through the cafe's ambient noise like a scalpel. That is incredibly stupid. Audrey gasped, her wide, tear-filled eyes snapping up to meet mine. Chloe, how can you be so cruel? Liam is making a sacrifice because he cares about his friends. A sacrifice? I scoffed, picking up the paper menu just to have something to look at besides their pathetic faces. He's throwing away an Ivy League education to babysit a grown woman who can't handle a college campus. That's not a sacrifice, Audrey. That's a codependency complex. Liam's face flushed dark red. Chloe, stop it! Have some empathy. I thought you, out of all people, would understand. I assumed we could all stay in Chicago together. You don't have to go to Parsons. The Art Institute here is great. I slowly lowered the menu and looked him dead in the eye. Let me make something abundantly clear to you, Liam. I am going to New York. I am going to Parsons. And you? I pointed a manicured finger at his chest. You are going to regret this for the rest of your life. But you'll do it without me. What are you saying? Liam's voice faltered, his arrogant facade finally cracking. I'm saying we're done. I stood up, grabbing my purse. Congratulations, Audrey. You finally got him all to yourself. I hope he was worth it. Chloe, wait! Liam scrambled out of the booth, grabbing my wrist. You're breaking up with me? Over this? After 3 years? I looked down at his hand gripping my wrist, then back up to his panicked eyes. The memory of his text message, as I lay dying, flashed in my mind. Stop overreacting. I ripped my arm out of his grasp. We aren't breaking up over college, Liam. We're breaking up because there are 3 people in this relationship, and I'm tired of being the only one acting like an adult. Have a nice life. I walked out of the coffee shop, the bell above the door chiming merrily behind me, as I stepped into the crisp spring air. A heavy, suffocating weight I hadn't realized I was carrying suddenly lifted off my shoulders. I inhaled deeply. The air tasted like freedom. The fallout at Weston High School was swift and brutal. By third period, the rumor mill had completely spun out of control. According to the whispers in the hallways, I was a heartless, ambition-obsessed ice queen who had abandoned her grieving, selfless boyfriend because he chose to support a friend in need. Audrey, naturally, played the victim flawlessly. She walked through the corridors flanked by her sympathetic friends, dabbing her eyes with a tissue and whispering about how awful she felt that she had ruined my relationship with Liam. Liam tried to corner me by my locker twice. The first time, he tried to use his charm, offering me a half-hearted apology and suggesting we take a break until I cooled off. The second time, he grew angry, accusing me of never really loving him if I was so willing to throw him away over a zip code. Liam, the deposit for Parsons was paid an hour ago, I told him coldly, slamming my locker shut. Move on. And I did exactly that. I detached myself entirely from the high school drama. While my classmates obsessed over prom dresses and graduation parties, I locked myself in my makeshift studio in the basement. I had a severe advantage. 10 years of industry experience stored in the brain of an 18-year-old. In my past life, I had eventually clawed my way into the fashion industry. But I was always hindered by my lack of a formal degree and the constant financial drain of Liam's life. I had learned the hard way, pinning garments on live models in cramped, unventilated Chicago warehouses, fighting for scraps of recognition. Now, I possess the technical skills of a seasoned designer and the unburdened future of a prodigy. I decided to create a piece for the prestigious Vanguard Young Designer Showcase, a national competition that I had skipped in my previous life because I had been too busy helping Liam pack for his dorm. The winner would receive a full scholarship grant and a feature in a prominent fashion editorial. I spent weeks sourcing fabrics. I bypassed the cheap polyester blends at the local craft store and took a train into the city, spending my saved-up prom money at an obscure textile wholesaler in the garment district. I bought 4 yards of liquid, emerald green silk charmeuse, and a roll of delicate black chantilly lace. My sewing machine hummed late into the night. I was employing techniques I technically shouldn't have known, yet intricate French seams, a flawless bias cut that required mathematical precision, and a hand-draped bodice that mimicked the structure of a vintage corset without the suffocating boning. I poured every ounce of my past life grief and my newfound fire into the garment. It wasn't just a dress, it was my armor. Prom night arrived in late May. I hadn't planned on going, but an hour before the event, I changed my mind. I needed a trial run for the dress, and honestly, I wanted them to see exactly what they had lost. When I walked into the gymnasium of Weston High, the loud thumping bass of the DJ seemed to momentarily pause. The emerald silk clung to my curves like water, moving with a fluid, mesmerizing grace with every step I took. The black lace peeked out from the deep plunge of the back, walking the fine line between dangerous and elegant. I had pulled my hair into a sleek structural chignon and wore a striking dark red lip. I looked like a woman who had walked off a Paris runway, not a teenager at a suburban prom. Across the dance floor, I saw Liam. He was standing near the punch bowl, dressed in a standard, ill-fitting rented tuxedo. Next to him was Audrey, wearing a puffy, pale pink tulle monstrosity that made her look like a frosted cupcake. Liam's eyes locked onto me, and I watched the color drain from his face. He looked absolutely gutted. For a second, he took a step toward me, almost involuntarily, but Audrey immediately hooked her arm through his, anchoring him to his spot. She glared at me, her face pale with jealousy. I didn't give them a second glance. I spent the night dancing with my actual friends, taking photos, and feeling entirely present in my own life for the first time. Later that evening, while waiting for my Uber outside the venue, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Mrs. Harrington, a wealthy local socialite and a major patron of the Chicago art scene who was serving as one of the parent chaperones. "Excuse me, dear," Mrs. Harrington called out, her sharp eyes scanning my dress. "Who are you wearing? I don't recognize the cut. Is that an archived Tom Ford?" I smiled, stepping closer to the car. "No, Mrs. Harrington. I designed and constructed it myself. My name is Chloe Bennett." Her eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. She reached into her Chanel clutch and handed me a thick, embossed business card. "I sit on the board of the Vanguard Showcase, Chloe. If you haven't submitted your portfolio yet, I suggest you expedite it. You have an extraordinary eye." "Thank you," I said, slipping the card into my purse. "I submitted my entry yesterday." 2 weeks later, on graduation day, I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. When my name was called, I didn't look at Liam, who was sitting 3 rows back. I didn't look at Audrey. I looked straight ahead. The day after graduation, the results of the Vanguard Showcase were announced online. I had won first place. By the time Liam finally mustered the courage to drive to my house to beg for another chance, standing in my driveway with a bouquet of cheap gas station roses, he was too late. My bedroom was empty. My car was gone. I was already sitting in seat 3A on a direct flight to John F. Kennedy International Airport, watching the Chicago skyline shrink into a tiny, insignificant speck beneath the clouds. This was my second chance, and I was going to conquer the world. 5 years vanished in a blur of silk, sleepless nights, and the relentless, intoxicating rhythm of New York City. While my peers spent their weekends partying in trendy Brooklyn lofts, I practically lived in the design studios at Parsons. I possessed a distinct, almost unfair advantage. I already knew the upcoming trends, the inevitable shifts in silhouettes, and the specific textiles that would dominate the next decade. But I didn't rely on memory alone. I poured my soul into every stitch, determined to build an empire so towering that Liam Sterling's shadow could never touch it. By the time I was 22, I hadn't just graduated at the top of my class. I had utterly, completely dismantled the expectations of the fashion elite. My senior thesis collection, titled Resurgence, caught the eye of Eleanor Wright, the notoriously ruthless editor-in-chief of an iconic fashion magazine. She featured my pieces in a stunning 12-page editorial. Overnight, my label, Maison Bennett, was born. To fund the rapid expansion of my brand, I needed serious capital. That was when Dominic Pierce walked into my life. Dominic was a self-made venture capitalist from London, sharp-featured, perpetually dressed in impeccably tailored charcoal suits, and notoriously difficult to impress. He didn't care about fashion. He cared about ambition and numbers. During our pitch meeting, while other designers offered him vague promises of artistic vision, I handed him a ruthless, 5-year financial projection, completely optimized production pipelines, and a guaranteed profit margin. Dominic looked over the portfolio, his sharp blue eyes flicking up to meet mine. "You don't just want to design dresses, Miss Bennett," he had murmured, a slow, approving smile touching his lips. "You want to conquer the industry." "I intend to monopolize it, Mr. Pierce," I replied without missing a beat. He funded me the very next day. Over the next 2 years, Dominic and I built Maison Bennett into a global powerhouse. And somewhere between late-night strategy meetings over cold takeout and celebrating our first multi-million-dollar quarter in Paris, our partnership evolved into a quiet, unshakable romance. Dominic respected me. He didn't need to be coddled, and he never asked me to shrink myself to make him feel larger. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in Chicago, Liam's life had predictably stagnated. I kept tabs on him not out of lingering affection, but out of a dark, satisfying curiosity. Just as I had foreseen, Audrey had dropped out of Columbia College after a single semester, citing overwhelming stress. Liam had started his tech company, Tech, but without my dual income to support them during the lean years, he had been forced to take on massive, predatory loans. Worse, Audrey had insisted on being named the company's director of culture, drawing a massive salary while contributing absolutely nothing to the struggling startup. By 24, Liam was drowning. Industry blogs reported that Tech was desperately seeking Series B funding to avoid bankruptcy. In a final, desperate play, Liam managed to score an invitation to the prestigious Vanguard Charity Gala in Manhattan, a massive networking event crawling with billionaires. He was coming to New York to beg for his professional life. Audrey, completely oblivious to their impending financial ruin, was treating the trip like a lavish vacation. According to her aggressively curated social media, she was determined to make a grand entrance at the gala to prove she belonged among the elite, and she wanted a Maison Bennett gown to do it. When my lead showroom manager, a brisk woman named Sarah, informed me that an Audrey Carmichael had requested an expedited VIP fitting at our Fifth Avenue flagship, a cold, thrilling shiver raced down my spine. The waitlist for a custom Maison Bennett was 6 months long. Audrey had demanded to jump the line, offering a credit card that, according to my internal checks, was maxed out to its absolute limit. "Should I turn her away, Miss Bennett?" Sarah asked, holding the iPad with Audrey's haughty email. I stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, watching the yellow cabs crawl along the Manhattan streets below. A slow, venomous smile spread across my face. "No, Sarah," I said smoothly, turning back to my desk. "Approve the appointment and clear my schedule for tomorrow afternoon. I want to handle this fitting personally." The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for the mice to walk in. Rain lashed against the heavy glass doors of the Maison Bennett flagship store, but inside, the atmosphere was perfectly climate-controlled and fragrant with white lilies. I stood perfectly still behind the frosted glass of the VIP fitting suite, listening to the high-pitched, incredibly grating sound of Audrey's voice echoing in the showroom. No, no, that's completely wrong, Audrey whined, presumably tossing a silk swatch back at one of my assistants. I told you I want something that screams billionaire's wife. Liam, tell them. Tell them they aren't listening to me. Audrey, please keep your voice down, Liam muttered. His voice sounded thin, exhausted, lacking entirely the arrogant resonance it used to hold. We're already stretching the budget just being in this store. Just pick something off the rack. Off the rack? At Mason Bennett? Audrey scoffed loudly. Are you insane? If you want to impress investors tonight, I need to look the part. You promised me, Liam. You promised you'd take care of me. I stepped out from behind the frosted glass, the heels of my Christian Louboutins clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. I was wearing a sharply tailored, plunging ivory suit of my own design, my hair cascading over my shoulders in loose, confident waves. On my left ring finger rested a massive, flawless emerald-cut diamond, a recent, very private gift from Dominic. I'm afraid, Miss Carmichael, that no amount of silk or tulle can mask a fundamentally cheap disposition, I said, my voice echoing clearly through the hushed showroom. Both Liam and Audrey froze. Audrey spun around, her mouth dropping open. She looked older, her face pinched with perpetual dissatisfaction, her designer clothes failing to hide her terrible posture. Liam turned slowly, and the moment his eyes landed on me, it was as if all the oxygen had been vacuumed out of his lungs. He stumbled back a half step, knocking into a mannequin. Chloe? Liam whispered, his voice cracking. He stared at me as if I were an apparition. He looked at my flawless suit, the authoritative way I commanded the space, and then, inevitably, his eyes dropped to the massive diamond on my hand. Welcome to my maison, I said gracefully, folding my arms. Though I must admit, I'm surprised to see you here, Liam. The financial press suggests Oratech can barely afford server space, let alone a $40,000 couture gown. Audrey's face turned a violent shade of magenta. You own Maison Bennett? That's impossible. You're just Chloe from the suburbs. I was Chloe from the suburbs, I corrected her, my tone dripping with icy condescension. Then I dropped 80 pounds of dead weight and moved to New York. You should try it sometime, Liam. Though looking at your current balance sheets, it seems the dead weight is dragging you straight to the bottom of the ocean. Liam swallowed hard, stepping toward me. Chloe, please. My God, you look incredible. I had no idea this was your brand. I've been trying to find you for years. Don't lie to me, Liam, I snapped, my eyes narrowing. You haven't been looking for me. You've been looking for a bailout, and you aren't going to find one here. Liam, tell her off, Audrey shrieked, stamping her foot like a petulant child. She can't speak to us like this. We are paying customers. Actually, you aren't, I motioned to Sarah, who stepped forward with a sleek black tablet. Your primary card was declined 3 minutes ago, Audrey. So was the backup. It appears your credit limit has been drastically overdrawn. Audrey gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She looked at Liam, her eyes wide with panic. Liam, what is she talking about? You said the Series B funding was a lock. It fell through, Liam confessed quietly, not taking his eyes off me. The utter defeat in his posture was almost tragic. I was hoping to pitch Dominic Pierce tonight at the gala. He's our last hope. A low, genuine laugh escaped my lips. I couldn't help it. The sheer poetic justice of the universe was almost too sweet to bear. What's so funny? Liam demanded, a flash of his old anger returning. You want to pitch Dominic Pierce? I asked, wiping a stray tear of mirth from my eye. Liam, Dominic Pierce is notoriously ruthless. He only invests in winners. He doesn't throw money at sinking ships captained by men who let their personal baggage destroy their profit margins. I'll convince him, Liam said desperately. Oratech has good bones. I just need to get in a room with him. I know I can charm him. I highly doubt that. A smooth, baritone voice echoed from the entrance of the showroom. Dominic strolled into the room, shaking the rain off his bespoke umbrella. He handed his cashmere coat to an assistant and walked straight toward me, wrapping a possessive, loving arm around my waist and pressing a soft kiss to my temple. He looked at Liam with the cold, detached interest of a scientist, observing a particularly pathetic insect. "Mr. Sterling, I presume?" Dominic asked, his British accent crisp and unforgiving. "My secretary mentioned you've been calling my office incessantly for 6 weeks." Liam's jaw practically hit the marble floor. He looked from Dominic to me, to the way Dominic's hand rested comfortably on my waist. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "You," Liam stammered, pointing a trembling finger. "You're with him?" "I am his fiancée," I stated proudly, leaning into Dominic's embrace. "And his business partner." "I've reviewed your prospectus, Sterling," Dominic said coldly. "Your tech is derivative, your burn rate is astronomical, and your executive payroll, specifically the absurd salary allocated to your director of culture, is borderline fraudulent. I wouldn't invest a single dime in Aura Tech if it were the last software company on Earth." Audrey let out a loud, dramatic sob and ran out of the store, pushing past the security guard and disappearing into the rainy New York streets. Liam didn't chase her. He just stood there, entirely broken, surrounded by the beautiful, opulent empire I had built from the ashes of the future he had destroyed. He finally understood the magnitude of what he had thrown away. He had traded a diamond for a cheap imitation, and now he had absolutely nothing.
"Sarah!" I called out, my voice dismissive as I turned my back on Liam. "Please have security escort Mr. Sterling out. He's tracking mud on the marble."
I didn't look back as Liam was ushered out into the storm. I simply smiled, took Dominic's hand, and walked upstairs to my design studio. The past was finally dead, and my future was brilliant. Did that satisfying revenge give you the closure you were craving? Watching Chloe build her empire and absolutely crush Liam's ego was the ultimate comeback story. If you loved this dramatic twist of fate, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never settle, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, satisfying drama. See you in the next story.